Hello and welcome everyone to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. So excited for our conversation today. I've got Tanya Geisler here. She is a complete rock star, brilliant woman who is going to have a chat with us about imposter complex. Tanya, welcome. We're so excited to have you.
So honored and so delighted to be here. Thank you for having me here.
Oh, our pleasure. You know, our audience, you're in for such a treat today. I've known Tanya now, I guess, a couple of years, right? You've done quite a bit of stuff with Women in Leadership Empowered, and all of the women who have experienced you have just absolutely loved their learnings. And so we decided that a podcast would be in order so that we can touch more people and help them understand imposter complex even more so. But before we jump into all that, because I know everybody's super excited, I want to officially introduce Tanya. Listen, Tanya is seriously, like I said, a rock star. She is a certified leadership coach. She's also a TEDx Women Speaker, and maybe she can tell us a little bit later where to find her TEDx talk. She's a writer who teaches leaders how to combat their imposter complex and lead with iconic impact. And that way they get to achieve their ultimate goals, not just those little ones, but the ultimate goals. Her clients include some best-selling authors, heads of industries, MPs, public speakers, leaders, entrepreneurs, and rock star motivators. So she has a very vast clientele base. And so that'll actually set us off nicely to jump right into, talking about imposter complex. So Tanya, thank you for being here. We're just thrilled to get into this today.
So happy to be really so happy to be here. And, I love that because I've been doing this work for such a long time, when I hear that bio read back or when I hear your words, I'm just like, yep, look at that. That's all me. That's all the truth. But there were many years where I would, I've been working with the same folks for a really long time, and it would just it would creep in and it would say, yeah, but who are you two? And I've got some good tools. And so I'm delighted and honored to be here. And that TEDx talk, I realized that is 10 years old.
Oh, wow.
It is amazing to me, right? And actually somebody called it about 3 years after it came out. They called it it's a classic. I'm like, really? This is how the internet works now? 3 years later, it's a classic. Anyway, that was 2012, and I still uphold every single word of it. So you can all find that at tanyageisler.com. It's one of the first things you can see. I'm still
beautiful.
Really proud of it. Yeah.
Beautiful. And let's make sure, before we wrap up our call today, let's make sure and remind everybody where they can find that, because I'm sure after they hear our conversation today, they're going to want to dig into that more.
Great.
Well, let's jump in. So let's talk about how you moved from this, ultimately unsatisfying career that you had in advertising to creating your niche as this expert or master in imposter complex. And, I want to make sure we also tap into the aspect of joy and how joy is such a core value for you. So maybe just share with us how you've made this transition.
Wow. This is one of those how long is a piece of string kind of things. There's so much I want to say about all of this. So, I was in advertising for years and years and was generally quite successful. And just really felt like something was missing. It didn't really feel like, my capital P purpose. The year my daughter was born, my mother also passed. And so I was tender age of 32 and just, recognizing the vastness of life and how really tender and short it is, really, ultimately. My mom was 59 when she passed. So I kept thinking, Mary Oliver's What Will You Do with This One Wild and Precious Life of Yours? And I really didn't think that maybe what I was doing felt like it. And so I had this beautiful experience for a dear friend of mine, it's so much easier to attend to other people than it is to ourselves. And, who was making her own career transition. And she was really not seeing how she was really showing up in the world. So I convened a group of folks who knew her from different aspects of her life. And we reflected back to her when we had seen her really powerful, when we had been really proud of her, what we wanted to see more of from her. And it was this really beautiful, aspirational kind of experience. And I thought, oh, I want that for myself. And from that experience, she ended up discovering coaching. She went from sales into coaching and made this beautiful transition, inspired by what we had reflected back to her, because of course she wasn't able to see herself. We just can't. And so as at that period, that was the time when my mother passed away, my daughter was born, I was like, ooh, how about me? How are people seeing me? And through that experience, I decided to create my own board of my life, which is what I called it, like board of your, and then other people started asking me for it. So I created this program called Board, BOARD, of Your Life, where we would help people to see how they were really showing up and what we wanted more of them, right? So they could really step into the possibility that was available to them. In that process, I discovered that I was actually doing something that I had never heard of before called coaching. And that friend who had done this, the beta program of it, became a coach. So she guided me along the way. And very quickly, I started working with some of those incredible folks that you referenced at the beginning. And there was this through line. It didn't matter if they'd sat on Oprah's couch, or if their book had been on the New York Times bestselling list, or if they'd sold, $3 million the previous quarter in real estate. They seemed to be incapable of internalizing their success. They would chalk it up to luck, fluke, timing, or having somehow managed to convince somebody they were more successful or smarter or more capable than they actually were. And I recognized this experience in myself that had followed me all throughout academics and in my career as in advertising. And then somebody finally named it for me, and they said, oh, that's the imposter complex. So when I was invited to do the TEDx talk, and they said, and the theme was, what's the space between what is real and what we imagine? That. And that really became the first time that I started studying it really diligently. And it's just been this unending source of fascination and excitement for me to continue to pull out these different strands. So that's how I moved from here to there-ish, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I something you just said there, it was like boom as well. Real versus imagined. So it's that middle point, right? And so many questions. So you shared a little bit about your own personal experience. So when you moved from advertising into coaching, how did Imposter Complex impact you personally?
As a coach, first of all, who are you to help people to figure all of this out when you don't have everything figured out perfectly? The Imposter Complex insists upon certainty, and really, really, really upholds perfectionism. So there was that. So who are you? You don't have, sometimes you're in a daydream and you'll get on the wrong subway. How are you supposed to help people, lead massive teams when so those are the kinds of things that would show up. And then also as a business owner, you have to wear so many different hats. So as I developed my excellence and as a coach, it didn't mean that I was an excellent business owner. It didn't mean that I was excellent at marketing or excellent at program design or excellent at operations. So all of these places where we want to be excellent at there's like a dangling participle or something there. That's where the imposter complex is going to show up. Right?
Love it.
So it's in the coaching and it's in the business, and it really, for me, shows up in all of the areas that are deeply meaningful to me.
Yeah.
The places that I'm continuing to strive and to stretch, and where I want to deepen my proficiency. And the integrity piece is always going to make sure that I'm sharpening my tools and making sure that I am getting better and iterating.
Beautiful, beautiful. So why do you think so many people suffer from not suffer, that's not the right word. They doubt their abilities and potentially feel like a fraud. I mean, I hear this all the time with clients that I'm working with as well. So where is that coming from?
So, I mean, a little like most of the questions, I wish there were shorter soundbite answers. The truth is, first of all, I like to attribute the teachers. I think it's really important. The imposter phenomenon is a term that was coined by clinical psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes back in 1978. So they were working with high functioning, high achieving women at Oberlin College and recognized the same thing that I was recognizing and you're recognizing with your own clients. This doesn't matter how successful they are, they would chalk it up to luck, fluke, timing, etc., or external factors. Mm-hmm. We know that there is a bioevolutionary, it's part of our bioevolutionary response to evolve. So we're perpetually, it actually makes sure that we don't mutate too fast, a little like our fear responses. And it's also part of our fundamental tribal need to belong.
Yeah.
So it's the part of the reason we fear success as much as we fear failure. Now, everything I say here isn't for everyone. Everything we say isn't for everyone. So, if you don't resonate with fear of success, maybe you resonate with fear of failure, or both, right? So try to, we're not speaking to everybody. And I also think it's important for me to name, I'm a white, neurotypical, able-bodied woman of middle class means living in North America. So that's not going to be everybody else's lived experience. So I think that we run the risk when we say it comes from any one specific place. We're all coming into this from our own intersections and then from our own conditioning. So it definitely, it affects folks who have beautiful values of integrity and proficiency and excellence. And I always say that's the good news, right? Mm-hmm. This matters because of your tribal need to belong, because you are relational and want to belong, and because you want to be really good at these things. I think those are excellent. And I think those are leadership qualities that we want other people to have, right? We want to uphold that. But it also is most prevalent and affects people most adversely who come from marginalized or oppressed groups, or who have been systemically excluded. I think it's really important that we name those things. So I often talk about my husband, Greg, is a white, neurotypical, able-bodied dude living in North America, right? So he's in this North American sphere, he's the center of, quote unquote, the universe. Mm-hmm. So for every space that we are distanced from Greg, and I use that with permission, by, race, age, gender, social class, we are going to have an exacerbated sense of the imposter complex. So I think that that's really important too, rather than just looking at it being, it's all, it's an internal kind of thing. Because I think we can gaslight people a lot when we say it's just that and just get over it. People have actually had experiences where they've been told, you don't belong running that company. Yeah. You're the wrong everything. Yeah. So I think that we've had those experiences as well. And I think oftentimes we don't have enough models of possibility of what is. We don't see somebody who looks like us, speaks like us, has the same frames of reference as us. It makes it very hard to follow into their footsteps, or they just haven't existed. So I think there's some of that. And again, I think it's deeply rooted. So for me, my work is about, okay, what are all of the things that are happening concurrently? And then when we know that we're dealing with the imposter complex, what are we going to do about it? Because it's going to try to keep you out of action, doubting your capacity, and alone and isolated. And I'm not here for any of that.
Yeah. Well, and that's the choice, right? It's making that decision that you're not going to listen to that. You're actually going to go look for what are the possibilities and why not me, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of why me, it's why not me? Like put yourself out there. I think the other thing that's important to highlight, and we talked about that earlier when you and I were speaking, is having some imposter complex might not affect all aspects of your life. It can be certain aspects of your life, and that's very normal. Like it can just happen, right?
We wouldn't get out of bed if it affected us in all areas of our life. So you can see behind me some art. Well, that's actually all of my kids' crayons, like that last little bag of Ziploc bags of crayons, and you're like, I can't throw this out. So I blasted it onto some art.
Oh,
but
very cool.
every painting in my house is a painting that I have done with my husband, usually over a bottle of Merlot or something like that. So we enjoy creating art. I have zero imposter complex when it comes to creating art. I do not need to be excellent at that, nor my yoga practice, right? Like it doesn't matter. But for me, I'll say this for myself, in my speaking and my coaching and my parenting and my teaching and my writing, those are the places it's going to come up. Those are the most important aspects of my realm. So every time I stretch myself out of my comfort, that's where it's going to show up.
Yeah.
It will meet you at the precipice of your expansion.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Wow. Okay. So I just had goosebumps when you said that. And because you asked me earlier if I ever, if I ever come across imposter complex for myself. And I said, no, not really. But when you just said that, I'm just thinking, because I'm starting my PhD next week. And I was in last night going in, getting set up to do my induction. And I was actually experiencing, so I'm like, am I crazy? Like, what am I doing? Why? I haven't been to school in 40 years, 30 years. I don't even count how many years, but I did experience that.
Yes.
And I probably will for a while until I get integrated into the system. And, I know I'm the oldest person in the classroom and all those things that come up.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And so when you mentioned earlier, what I realized, what I know to be true, and this is my work, let me just be very clear. My work isn't about eradicating the imposter complex. I don't think that that's actually healthy. It's a little like eradicating fear, right? If this is part of our tribal need to belong, that means that we are relational. It means that we are being mindful of making sure we don't evolve too quickly. We just need to make different choices. But usually when I meet somebody like you, who is very accomplished and doesn't seem to have the same, doesn't seem as hooked, what I know to be true is that that's a person who's got good tools. Because as I say all the time, the only difference between you and the person you admire is that they have access to those tools. Yeah. So for you, I'm not coaching or advising or anything because you have your tools, but that point where we are at that precipice of our expansion, we have to look back to our life and look at all the times that we have been here before. Yeah. Right? You've been here 1,000 times. The first time you parented, the first time you managed, the first time you led a team, the first time you presented, it's all the same thing. It just looks different. And yes, it's bigger and it's this and it's that, but there was still that moment before you leaped and discovered that the party was on the other side of the resistance. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
That's awesome. What we have to remind ourselves, right? Yeah. I've been here before. So when you probably ask your clients, what have they done? What's their proof of their capacity? And they're like, what does my 7th grade science fair project have to do with any of this big career transition? Yep. You remind them, there was a moment before you had done it. And then you jumped and discovered the party was on the other side of the resistance.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Well, so I know you've done tons of work. You do lots of speaking. Your TEDx talk, all of these things that you've done. And, imposter complex can be very sneaky how it shows up. So maybe, and I know you've developed these 12 lies that imposter complex tells us, maybe you can share at least a few of those with our audience.
Yeah. Okay. So this is part of the place when do you remember, what's his name? A Beautiful Mind?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And he sees these formula. This is how I see the imposter. It's like, it is a structure, and I can, we can touch point any place. Ultimately, it's important that we remember that it will keep you out of action, it will keep you dead in your capacity, and it will keep you alone and isolated. And so it's going to have us believing 12 specific lies, but it's also going to send us to coping mechanisms to avoid feeling like the imposter. And those are perfectionism, procrastination, diminishment, comparison, people pleasing, and leaky boundaries. Okay.
Just one more time, just so our audience really captures that, because that's powerful.
And I really think that this is like the lies are so tantalizing, but the way that we recognize how it actually impacts us, these behavioral traits, I think that becomes the real opportunity. So it's going to keep us out of action, doubting our capacity, and alone and isolated by having us hang out in one of our coping mechanisms, which is to say perfectionism, procrastination, comparison, diminishment, leaky boundaries, or people pleasing.
Wow. So that's a great takeaway for our audience to when do I do that? Why do I do that? When I'm in that perfectionism mode, why is that happening? Or if I'm on social media comparing myself to all these other people, what is that doing for me? Right? Or procrastination. Procrastination is a big one. That one comes in so often.
It's, again, it's really a ring around the, what we say we want. And the interesting thing is these behaviors will ping pong off of each other. So again, a little like, we don't experience the imposter complex in all aspects of our life. We never get out of bed. We also don't experience all of these at the same time. Otherwise we never get out of bed, or the lies. But what gets fascinating is that we go to these behaviors to not feel like the imposter. So if my perfectionism will save me, from the fact that I fear that I don't belong.
Yeah.
But when we actually overwork, overproduce, overdeliver, we look around and we think, wait a minute, why does nobody else have to work so hard or overproduce? Shoot, I don't belong here. Right? So each of these behaviors, if you're a people pleaser, right? Oh, great, everybody, you use your charm, your likability, everybody loves you, everybody thinks you're fantastic, yay, you belong. And then they give you an opportunity and you go, oh, they're just giving me this opportunity because they like me, not because I'm deeply skilled, deeply talented, and deeply excellent at what I do.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So each one of these will have us coming and going in different ways, of course. So it's really important that we recognize that's what's happening. Our coping mechanism is part of what's keeping us feeling like the imposter. Layered and complex, to be certain.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I also think it's important that we don't gaslight ourselves and say, stop being a perfectionist, stop being a people pleaser, because those aspects of ourselves are beautiful. Your perfectionism comes from a deep value of excellence. As a people, right? Like, that's a good thing. As a people pleaser, you have a beautiful value of inclusivity, right? You want to make people feel welcome. That's a good thing. If you're somebody who what's that?
You want to serve others. You want to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. If you are somebody who compares a lot, you actually have a really beautiful value of connection. If you're somebody who diminishes, you have a gorgeous value of humility. If you are a procrastinator, like, you have a lot of discernment, right? And if you have leaky boundaries, you're really generous. So when we look at it from that framing, remembering that the self-development space is a $40 billion industry, which is a lot of money invested in making people feel terrible about their very nature, we can look at those beautiful, the golden shadow of these behaviors and say, that's actually your leadership edge, because that is the world that I want to live in, where leaders are inclusive, where leaders are generous, where they are connecting, where they prize excellence. That's a good place to be. So I like to try to dial that aspect up and see these are the opportunities. But when the procrastination keeps you out of action, doubting your capacity, and alone and isolated, let's get to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So many things I heard there, Tanya. One, I love how you reframed, right? Like, because every time we perceive it as a negative, there is a positive, right? And so it is flipping that switch mentally to look at the possibility, right? Or to look at what's the opposite effect of that. And something you said also about integrity, right? when you are, a people pleaser, as an example, and if you're not doing that, then you're out of integrity with who you are authentically. And so, understanding how to flip that switch instead of saying, oh, it's a bad thing that I'm a people pleaser, I'm always doing for others, right? It's okay to be a servant leader. It's okay to do that, right? It's just having those boundaries of, to not completely deplete yourself. But I love how you flip that. And so, sometimes it's not just about the self-confidence that gets in our way, right? But it's more of that lack of acceptance of what our abilities are. And I think that comes in especially with people who are high achievers or have high expectations of themselves. Yeah. And so what are some things that you would recommend to help those people to really see their value?
So a couple of things here, and there's a couple of doorways I could enter into. So I'll just pick that one and say that I think it's safe to assume that everybody who's listening right now is a high achiever with those strong values of proficiency and excellence and integrity. And so I talk about, unshakable confidence, being iconic as kind of a structure in and of itself, where integrity, presence, and action converge in this Venn diagram. And so I think it's helpful to understand, yes, high achievers, but how does it show up for you? How does the imposter complex show up for you? And then where do you go to hide? And if you go to hide in people pleasing, that usually tells me that there can be a crisis of integrity. Crisis is a very big word, but let's just go with it for the moment. And for me, integrity comes down to, how are you showing up authentically? How are you being loyal to your vision? And this is usually the kicker, how are you honoring your word to yourself? So yes, the people pleasing, we know that we get here because of a beautiful value of inclusivity. And let's also face it, safety for a lot of folks who've been marginalized or oppressed, making sure that they're part of the collective or the dominant group is an instrument of safety. So, but when we find it to be a challenge, am I honoring my word to myself? Am I being loyal to my vision? Am I being authentic? Or am I watering down who I am because of other people's needs and expectations? So that becomes that person's work. If they are people pleasers, or actually if they have leaky boundaries, paying attention to the integrity, that's the homework. If you are somebody who diminishes or compares a lot, that means that there's usually something, we're not really rooting into our power. We're not really allowing ourselves to feel supported. And here's the kicker here, we're not holding ourselves with reverence. And that's part of how we are dimming our light, or we are over identifying with what's happening in other people's landscapes, not paying attention to our own inner landscape.
Wow.
So that becomes our work, is to root back into presence, get realigned with our power, get realigned with our support, and my goodness, bring in some reverence for ourselves. And then finally, if you find that it's really perfections or procrastination that is the quote unquote challenge, then action is where you want to pay attention. How resilient, how tenacious are you willing to fail? Those are the places to be looking. So I find those just give us a little bit of an opportunity, but we got to take down the temperature of feeling, terrible about the fact that we collude with these behaviors. That's just our human nature. It's what we do with it, to your point, that's going to make all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And sounds so easy.
Hashtag simple, not easy all the days, right? Oh my gosh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and again, I just want to emphasize a couple of things that you shared there. Is like, my big takeaway from what you described there is, find your psychological safety place, right? Where are you feeling safe? And honor yourself. Like, human nature, we always go outside looking for those external fixes or support. And it's really internally where we need to pay attention, right? And where are we out of alignment, so that we can show up in integrity and more fully ourselves.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
I definitely feel like, I did the ask a question with a question kind of thing, or answer a question with a question. You did ask me what those specific lies are. So this is just helpful for people to maybe you don't necessarily resonate with procrastination or perfectionism. And again, this might not be for you. I doubt it, but but you might hear some of these narratives instead. Your self-doubt is proof of your inadequacy, that's the first lie, right? The second lie is successful people don't experience this, right? This is where we like to keep people distance from ourselves. You are all or nothing. It loves these, you're either a failure or a success. There's nothing in between. You have nothing useful, original, or valid to say. And we believe that lie number 4, then we say nothing. We pass up opportunities to share, to collaborate. Line number 5, don't tell anyone about this. Don't tell anyone about this experience, otherwise they're gonna find out that you don't belong. Line number 6 is tell everyone about this, right? 7, you're not ready yet. 8, it's just a matter of time before this all crumbles beneath you.
Yeah, that's a big one.
That's a huge one, right? 9, you're never going to be able to pull that off again. Oof, that one sort of cut that. Actually, that's right here for me right now, and some things that are going on. You can't trust the praise of others because they're just being nice. This is really up for us people pleasers. What else do we have? You're going to have to fake it till you make it. That one gets me into so much hot water. I cannot even tell you. Because again, I absolutely fundamentally understand that we can borrow against confidence. We can to get ourselves into the door. But I think what has been historically more powerful is to root into the truth about your capacity, your strengths, your values, and your experience. And then when we root into that, then we don't collude with that imposterhood feeling that really can just come back and bite us on the other end of it too.
Absolutely.
And then finally, the last one is asking for help is for the weak, which again keeps us alone and isolated. But the one piece of good news is that there is always room for improvement.
Yes, exactly. For everyone. And if you think there's not, then that's a whole different set of challenges.
That's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and that's for another day.
That is for another day. Wow. So much great information. You and I could speak for we could go on for hours here, but we are going to be respectful of everyone's time. I want to make sure, because I know you have this great quiz that people can take. So why don't you take just 30 seconds, tell them where to find the quiz and what the quiz is going to tell them. And that way we can, give people a little more information.
So the quiz is really about helping you to discern which of those behavioral traits is the one that tends to trip you up, and then what to do about it. So it offers you a different framework and an identity to work with that has been the thing that you have been avoiding, but I'm going to show you how it's just a huge opportunity for you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And you can find that at TanyaGeisler.com. You can find me on Instagram, Tanya Geisler, and then at my link in the bio, you'll find the quiz there. First thing you'll see at my site is the quiz. Do it. It's really fascinating.
Yes. And it just opens up new doors, right? Absolutely. Oh my gosh, Tanya, thank you so much for being here with us today. This has been terrific. And as I said, we could spend hours talking about this. Super grateful to you for sharing your expertise. And this topic comes up all the time. And so my hopes is that, our audience that's listening, you'll take away a couple of nuggets and realize that it's normal to have imposter complex. And don't forget to reframe it. So when something shows up for you, how do you reframe that into something that serves you better? And help you to be more in alignment with who you are and who you're meant to be. Super grateful, Tanya. Thank you. And I want to thank our audience. Thank you so much for being here. We know you have a choice as to what podcast you listen to, and we're grateful that you support Women in Leadership Talk. And so we hope to see you again on our next podcast. And just as a reminder, when you brought up fake it until you make it, we actually had a podcast a couple of episodes ago. I don't remember exactly which number it was, but it was about not faking it. And it's very interesting, right? Like it really being true to your core. So you're bringing up some incredible points that, you know, can help stretch us and help us with that expansion. And thank you for reminding me that I'm at that place that I'm just expanding myself and to breathe into it and take it on. And, you know, whatever comes to me is what's meant to come to me.
What an exciting time. What an exciting time. I would actually love to hear what your result is from the quiz too. I have my suspicions, but we can talk about that another time. But congratulations on this big, huge, gorgeous step into your expansion. It's really exciting to see.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a wonderful week and we'll see you next time. Okay, take care.
Bye.